Welcome back everyone, and it's hard to believe that this is the last video I'll produce before Christmas. So it is perfectly fitting that I'll be looking back at one of my favourite Christmas presents from a good few years ago when I was growing up, and that is of course the 12-inch Episode 1 Obi Wan Kenobi figure. By now, I'm sure you're familiar with the routine. Let's start off by looking at this packaging, which is going to look very familiar because all of these figures had the exact same packaging. There's really very little nuance when it comes to the presentation of the 12-inch line. Of course, we have this window display behind the figure. In the interior inlay, we can see that red lightsaber effect, which is pretty cool and kept the branding, of course, from the Power of the Force line that Kenner adopted. And then we have that image of Darth Maul there. Again, pretty consistent with what we used to see in the Power of the Force line, except they've replaced Darth Vader's head with Darth Maul instead. And this looks pretty cool all in all. As I said, not an awful lot going on in the packaging otherwise. If we flip it and look at the side panel again, we have this sort of window display, which is kind of unusual. It's kind of unique to this line. And it's fine. I think, you know, it's quite nice that we can see the figure through it, but I think I probably would have preferred that they just stuck an image of the character so that we could have stacked these up on our shelves and seen a diverse array of different characters here. But hey, this is still perfectly serviceable. And then if we flip it, we can see the other characters in this wave. Now, this figure was released as part of the second wave, and we can see the other characters that were released in this wave. The Battle Droid and Watto. And kind of unusual choice selecting Watto for this lineup, I think, considering that we never got a 12-inch Padme, which probably would have made a lot more sense. As a kid, I was mad keen to get my hands on Obi-Wan. As much as I like Qui-Gon Jinn, for me, Obi-Wan was my favourite hero character in this film. So in terms of sculpting, I have to say, I think they've done a pretty good job. I always really like the sculpt because it looks pretty accurate in terms of the likeness, and you can definitely see this is recognisably Ewan McGregor. I think this is very clearly him. You can definitely see some of his key features there. If I was going to criticise, I would say that maybe it's a little bit soft, of course. This is not surprising considering the time these figures were produced. So it might be a little bit soft, and perhaps the face is a little bit too wide, but all in all, I actually think this is a pretty decent likeness. I also really like the choice to give him some rooted hair for his ponytail and for his braid. I think this was kind of unusual, and this could have gone disastrously bad, but I actually think it works really well. It gives him an extra texture, and it looks quite interesting. Now, with time, some of the knotted ties at the bottom there started to wear away and fracture a little bit, but all in all, this still looks pretty striking, I think. I really love these Jedi figures because they come with these fantastic robes, and this material is actually quite a thick, soft material, which works really well, but there's plenty of give in them. Plus, you'll notice at the back there is actually an elastic band to make sure that it's still relatively figure-hugging as well. So this is really effective, and I love the fact that it gives us two distinct different looks for this character with or without the Jedi robe. And they're also pretty generous with the material when it comes to the hood, which we can lift up and put over the face and create different looks. Now, there's no wire to be able to pose this. You do have to rely on gravity and just perseverance to mould this to his head, but this still looks pretty good when it's in place, and I really like that they bothered to consider this. Once again, if we look at the boots, we can see that these are uniquely sculpted and they are really very nicely painted. There's actually a couple of different washes running through this to make it actually look like leather, like they're actually worn, and I think it's actually very effective. As I've noted in previous videos, the Kenner line figures used to have these very chunky rubber boots that didn't have a lot of detail, and they used to look kind of ridiculous, a bit clunky and out of proportion with the rest of the figure, but these work really, really well. We can see that the rest of his costume tucks neatly into those boots, and he still looks perfectly in proportion. So this is actually very successful, and I think a massive improvement on the Kenner line. So in terms of articulation, he does have that fantastic ball joint in the neck, which I'm a huge fan of, which allows his head to be able to spin all the way around, to be able to lean from side to side, and of course bend forwards and backwards. I absolutely love this joint, and it works really, really well on this figure. He's got ball joints in the shoulders, of course, so his arms do lift up and out, which is great. There's an upper bicep swivel as well, which we can see here, which allows that arm to rotate all the way around, and then there's a single joint at the elbow that allows the lower arm to bend to 90 degrees. Finally, there's a pin swivel at the wrist, which allows the wrist to rotate all the way around and of course hinge forwards and backwards as well. Now he's got another ball joint in the waist, which allows him to spin from side to side and lean left and right and bend forwards and backwards. So pretty comprehensive stuff here. He's got a hinge at the hip, so the legs do kick out to the side, they kick forwards, and there is another joint at the knee, so we can bend that leg to 90 degrees. And all in all, I actually think the Obi-Wan has the best articulation in this line because he doesn't have any of those rubber limbs that we see on some of the other figures in this line. He also has his uniquely sculpted lightsaber, which is very nicely sculpted here. Lots of detail on it, which is fantastic, and decent paint apps as well. We can see red, we can see black, we can see silver. This is very nicely done, and you'll notice there is also a little hook on this, which means that it can hook on to his belt nice and securely. So you have this free option where the lightsaber is not ignited, but then you also have the blade that just slides into place there, and you have a fully extended lightsaber. All in all then, I absolutely adore this figure. It was a much wanted, much anticipated figure in my collection for that Christmas, and it made it complete. I loved all the Jedi and Sith that were released as part of this wave. They were really, really fun and really rewarding and just great to play with. But I think they just did such a tremendous job with Obi Wan out of all of them, simply because he had the best articulation. As I said, gone were the rubber joints that I always found slightly frustrating, and now he had these fantastic proper joints that you could put him in loads of cool different action poses and really get the most out of him during your play. So I really, really love this figure, and I love this wave as a whole. Actually, I think they've done a really good job with these Jedis. So there you have it. All that's left for me to say is to wish you a very Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in the new year. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.